Hello and welcome to the Truths from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 37. Today we're getting a whitetail report from Southeast Ohio, Minnesota, and New York. So stay tuned. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and today we are doing another DIY report number 2. The goal here is to get you guys some real-time information from a couple different states, so hopefully it can help you make some decisions before you hit the timber this week or the next. Hopefully it helps you put that buck on the ground that you've been after. The guys we're going to be talking to this week, very appreciative of them spending some time with me, but we're going to be talking to Camron Stover from Southeast Ohio, Josh Newville from Minnesota, and we're going to have Tim Bunao from the great state of New York chime in. So without further ado, let's get started with the details. All right, the first report for this week's DIY report is coming to you from Camron Stover. Southeast Ohio is where he's reporting, and he's from the safehunter.com website. How's it going, Camron?
Pretty good today. How are you doing today?
I'm not doing too bad, man. Had a late night last night. Had a drag out and a quick skinning to be done since it was a warm one, but we got her done, and we're full of coffee today, so we're plugging along. Not too bad.
Those are the late nights that I like to have, is when I've got
That's right.
work to do. So.
That's right, sir. So, hey, you're in Southeast Ohio. I know we were chatting just a little bit before. I know you've been checking cameras and have a pretty good sense of what's happening down there. So what are you seeing as far as, buck activity right now? Is it starting to pick up a little bit? Are you seeing some scraping, some rubbing? What's shaking?
There's definitely been a big pickup in the last week. I actually hit one camera today that I didn't really have a clue on what was going to be on its first card pull of the season. They can be. The farmer also has corn, and he's starting to take the corn out. Some patches he's already completely removed. Some he's still in the process of. But there were plenty of active scrapes along the edge of that soybean field. So that was a good sign. After checking those cards, all that scraping activity is happening at night, from probably 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. Very, very minimal daylight activity on that soybean field during the daylight hours.
Is that typical for that area this time of year?
Yes, that farm right there gets a lot of pressure. These deer cross the creek and come into that field at night. So it's typical. There's a lot more activity than I expected. Probably over 1,000 pictures on this card. I'm going to say 10% of them's does, the rest of them's bucks. So right. It's looking good. I'm just waiting on the bigger one to show up on film.
Right. So what about how's the weather been down there so far? And do you think I'm going to assume, since I'm in PA, I know we're not too awful far away from each other. It's been a little warm around here. Are you guys having that warm weather too? And do you think that might be impacting the movement, that you're seeing more of it at night versus during the day? Absolutely.
It's been a rough start to October. As far as the weather patterns that we've had, it's been very dry. It's been unseasonably warm for an extended period of time. I know there's certain areas around Southeast Ohio included that's having problems with EHD. It doesn't seem to be very widespread, but there's some areas that do have EHD outbreaks at this point in time. Of course, you probably know what Kentucky's going through. They've lost a huge amount of their deer herd. But we do have a cold front on the horizon, and I mean today. Actually, we're recording on Sunday. I'm looking at the Weather Channel right now, and the storm system's rolling in. We're looking at just under a half inch of rain that's expected today, and with that rain is coming some low temperatures. The high of 80 today. The low is 43. Tomorrow, the low is 37 on Monday. So I'm hopping out of work a little early, and my wife and I are going to be in a tree stand looking for one particular buck on our Ohio lease.
Nice. That's what I like to hear. Yeah, I've been following the Weather Underground. It looks like the low temp is going to meet high pressure on Monday. So it's usually, I know it's a good sign for good deer movement. I know you were mentioning that soybean field where you have some cameras and some scrapes that you were watching, but overall, what's the food sources look like right now? I know that you mentioned the farmers are starting to pull the crops out, and if they haven't already, are we having a good acorn year? Is there a ton of food in the timber yet? What's the situation there?
It's actually been a great year for acorn and hard mass. The soft mass even actually had a lot of good stuff on it too. A lot of apples and stuff, but those apples are drying out, and the acorn crop is the way to go right now.
Right. Yeah. The challenge I think that we've had here in Pennsylvania a little bit. It's been so good that it's hard to pick where you're going to be because it's just all over the place. It's not one tree dropping or a flat dropping. It seems like almost every white oak tree is dropping this year.
Yep, and you're exactly right. The properties that I hunt in southern West Virginia, it are absolutely loaded, and it's just a toss-up right now where that deer's going to be, and he's pretty much going to stick around where he's bedded at to feed, and that's typical when we have a hard mass that's successful in that season.
Right. So what about the this time of year is always some hunters dread it. The October lull, where you start to see a little less deer movement. A lot of the reasons being is that you get some of those unseasonably warm days, kind of coupled with the a good acorn year, or a bunch of food being in the timber. What are you seeing as far as the effect of the lull? And do you believe in, or do you buy into the hype, or do you kind of ignore it and just kind of get after it?
I'm not real big. I keep track of every deer that I notice that pops up on my news feed that's killed in the state of West Virginia. And the reason being, I'm actually from West Virginia. I'm not from Ohio, but I do cross the river in search of big deer. Mm-hmm. And I'm seeing big deer killed from the start of season to the end of season. Mm-hmm. And, of course, there's more people in the woods during November. We're taking time off. We spend more time. You got the rut going on. But during the right weather conditions, and that plays a big factor this time of year especially, you're going to have an opportunity to harvest a big deer if everything goes as right. And the hardest thing for some people to do is you're off work Saturday or Sunday, you haven't hunted all week, it's the beginning of the season, and you want to go get in a tree stand. And the hardest thing you can do, and the worst thing you do actually is actually go into that when the conditions aren't right. So what I've done this year is just take a step back. I actually talked to a buddy of mine a while ago, and he's like, "Have you even hunted this year?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've hunted. I'm just not hunting the areas that I'm expecting to be successful in. I'm going out, spending more time scouting." And that's what I did all morning this morning, was just scouting, putting my boots on the ground, looking for new scrapes. And I'm really not worried about wasting a lot of time in the stand. I'm more interested in learning more about the properties that I'm hunting and gaining access to more properties so it'll benefit me when the conditions are right.
Yeah, it's the old adage of working smarter, not harder, and I can definitely attest to that approach. So I'm sure it'll pay dividends for you this year. If not this year, it's the forward thinking that you have for looking at opportunities and sign and for the upcoming year. So speaking of your kind of strategies and tactics, this time of year, what do you typically like to do if you're going to crawl into a tree stand? What are you looking for? Is there a terrain feature that you usually kind of fancy? Of course, we're looking for certain weather. Just kind of take me through your thinking there during this part of the season, what you're looking for.
This time of year specifically, if I'm going to be hunting, I'm hunting for a particular deer. I'm not hunting for a group of does or something like that and a buck to come after that. So I'm hunting an oak tree that I know is dropping fresh acorns, specifically close to a bedding area. Right now, the particular buck that I feel like I've got a good pattern on, if he's walking by a camera in the morning, I know he's going to bed. So I can move in there in the evening. I'm basically doing all evening sits. I'm really not doing any morning sits this time of year because there's not very many opportunities available that you can access the properties I'm hunting without spooking deer. So access routes are very key this time of year. November, I can walk in 5 o'clock in the morning before it gets daylight. I may bump a deer, but there's 2 or 3 more that's going to take its place. October, I'm not seeing as many deer. I'm hunting a particular buck, so I'm trying to match his wit against mine, and it's a chess match. So.
Right. Awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks for the report from southeastern Ohio. I wish you good luck this year, and keep me posted on what's happening in your neck of the woods, man. I look forward to seeing some pictures on Facebook here in a couple weeks.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity, Clint. I wish you the best of luck, and look forward to hearing about your successful hunt that you were a part of yesterday.
Oh, yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. All right, reporter number 2 we have lined up is Josh Newville, and he's coming to us hot and live from Minnesota. How's it going, man, in the land of lakes?
Doing pretty good up here. Still really warm, but...
Is it?
Yeah.
Still got some warm weather. We got a little front that's kind of busting through here in Pennsylvania. So it's hopefully, I've been getting a few reports from some friends who have been out in the timber today, at least with the front of the beginning of the cold front coming through. Not seeing a whole lot as far as activity is concerned at this point in this area. But what are you seeing as far as buck activity going, as far as scraping and rubbing and stuff like that? Are you seeing some scrapes opening up in Minnesota at this point?
We've seen a ton of scrapes and a ton of rubs opening up right now, but in the middle of the summer, we went out and we put down some mock scrapes, and we were using some attractants to kind of help get them going, and they kicked off hard and heavy right away. But now everything's starting to open up, and there's rubs all over every tree in the woods, it seems like. And buck activity is starting to go up already. On Wednesday, my best friend Dave, he shot a nice 8-point buck that he actually called in.
Nice.
And this buck came in. He was followed in by another really, really big deer, and they were very, very aggressive on it. Like, they came in hot and heavy and grunting back and snort wheezing and everything, which seems really early for that right now. But
yeah,
he got it done.
It does seem really early, man. That's awesome that you guys are getting that kind of response at this point in the year. Is that typical, or is this something that's a little bit?
For me, this is the first time I've seen it happen, but we had a really nice cold front coming. That's probably what you guys are about to get right now.
Right.
And then the next day was a nice high-pressure day, and it just seemed like the woods came to life that night. And we busted out there right after work and got set up, and right at sundown, the woods came alive. There was all sorts of noise out there, grunts, wheezes, everything out there. So... And he got it done.
Nice. That's what you want, man. That sounds pretty good to me. I think there's probably a lot of people out there listening. It sounds pretty good to them too. But I want to touch on the weather here real quick. You'd mentioned the cold front had busted through. It might be what we're getting right now here in Pennsylvania. What's the weather looking like right now? I mean, you'd mentioned at the top it's a little bit warm. Do you have any relief in sight that you're seeing in the forecast?
Not really. I think it's supposed to be pretty warm and nice days throughout, like pretty nice bluebird days. But it's going to be warm. Upper 60s, low 70s for the foreseeable future. I think the best relief maybe Sunday. I think it might dip down to the upper 50s. So, but as far as that, it's going to stay warm for the near future.
Right. Well, I guess that 50-day, it's like you take what you can get at that point. With this time of year is always
Absolutely.
One of those. Yeah, it's always a crapshoot this time of year. You never know what you're going to kind of run into. It's you dress for the timber like you're schizophrenic most of the time, where it's you're not sure what to put on. What's the food source situation looking like out there? I know a lot of the guys I've been talking to in a bunch of different states, and I can even attest for this in PA, is that it's a pretty good acorn year, and so there's plenty of food in the timber, and of course a lot of the farmers have pulled a lot of the crop, or the ag fields have been pulled at this point. What are you seeing as far as food sources in Minnesota? Is it a good acorn year? They got plenty of food in the timber. There's still ag fields open.
Lots of ag fields open. We're still waiting to get the corn off the property that we hunt. We hunt a small parcel that has mostly corn, and then there's a nice oak ridge on it. That's the whole thing is basically oak trees, and every tree is dropping acorns like crazy, and a ton of activity up in those woods. But it seems like they're hitting those late at night, at least according to trail cameras.
Okay.
And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think you were going to probably answer my question. I was going to ask, are you seeing any daylight movement, or is that acorn crop really kind of keeping them back in the timber and keeping them, close to bed?
Definitely keeping them close to bed right now. We've definitely seen most of our activity right at sundown, and we're hunting kind of, being really, really cautious, hunting the edges, not trying to get too far in, but we'd sit on the edges, and then we'd hear him crunching on acorns in the back, so we slowly started moving back, and that's how my buddy ended up getting done, is moving a little bit further back and just kind of getting a little aggressive on his call.
Right. So with those acorns, man, I know whenever the food starts dropping in the timber, a lot of folks have a lot of different theories about the October lull, for different reasons why deer seem to disappear this time of year. I'm kind of that camp where it's probably shifting of food sources and bucks starting to shift ranges, getting close to that pre-rut area. What are you seeing as far as the October lull in your area? Is it in effect, and do you kind of buy into that notion?
I've never really believed into it. I feel like, and studies have shown that as October goes, they're moving more and more and more as October goes on. So it's just finding what corridors they're starting to move, and it seems like in the middle of October they're still really staying in some pretty thick stuff.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you know your property, you can pretty much pin down their movement pretty well, but a lot of guys don't have that.
Right. Yeah.
Opportunity. I understand. So.
Right. And I think it's a combination. It's like they're definitely moving, but I think you hit a key point there where it's like they're still staying in cover, right? And then you have the combination of there's still a lot of foliage on the trees at this point, so you're still in a situation where they're staying in thick areas, and then your visibility is reduced in comparison to what you would get in November, say. So that's always kind of, I think it's a combination of those things is what kind of, leads people to think that there's a lull in activity, because you're right. Studies have shown that, deer, of course, moving, and they increase movement from like the beginning of September, I think it is, through the rut. It just goes up exponentially from that point forward.
Right.
So what type of tactics and strategies do you like to use this time of year, knowing that the deer movement is happening? It may just be not quite as visible because they're staying a little bit more concealed. They have food close to bed. So how are you guys, and you in particular, kind of getting after it this time of year?
I am a big believer. I scent control all the way. So I play the wind. I use scent control. I use scent crusher products. I make sure that my scent is as little as possible. That way I can be a little more aggressive and get into those dangerous spots, I guess you could say. You're either going to get busted or you're going to see something. So I like to get a little bit aggressive. I've got my time's pretty minimum. I got a family, so I got to make the most of what I have when I'm out there. So I make sure my scent is as limited as possible. I know you can't ever be perfect, but I try to be as strong on as possible. And then I try to get into those nice pinch points, those nice natural funnels that I know they're moving in. And patience, just waiting it out.
Right. You hear that?
Yep.
I like the my slogan for you is highway to the danger zone this time of year. It's like willing to be a little bit risky. I got that really bad Tom Cruise, Top Gun movie stuck in my with the Iceman in my head right now. So danger zone might become your new nickname. Hey man, I appreciate you coming on and sharing some information from Minnesota. Good luck to you. Congrats to your buddy too, man. I know you guys had a track job that evening. He took that buck. I know we were messaging back and forth. So congrats to him. Good luck to you.
Yeah. No,
and good luck this hockey season too. Try to stay upright if you would.
Thanks, man, and congrats to you on your deer. It was a great deer.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. All right, report number 3 is coming from the great state of New York, the Empire State, via Tim Bunao. He's a fellow I've been following on social media, a guy who gets after it in the Whitetail Woods, and he's been gracious enough to hop on the show here and give us a little update as to what's happening in his neck of the woods. How's it going, man?
Not too bad. Yourself?
I'm hanging in there. I know while we were off the air, we were just talking about the daily grind and the dream living that we usually do, and how we might need to figure out a way to use client meetings as an excuse to get out of town and travel to some whitetail states. So we'll see if we can't make that happen. But I do want to get an idea, man, since, we don't live too awful far from one another, I'm really kind of curious to see if what you're seeing in the whitetail woods is, what I've been kind of seeing. So give me kind of an idea of what you're seeing as far as buck action that's happening. Are you seeing scrapes starting to open up? Are you starting to see a lot more rub lines? What's the story there?
Yeah, scrapes are definitely opening up. We'll see here. Let me know. I'm a big note taker.
I like it.
The 11th is when I first came across some fresh scrapes. This is actually just outside of a known buck bedding area, so it's fairly close to it. The other location, it's kind of more of a hangout. A lot of does come through there, and there's a couple of scrapes that pop up in there. They weren't really too I don't know what you want to call it there.
Too fresh.
They weren't really like too freshened up there. Probably young guys coming through there, just kind of making a little ruckus in there, just trying to. They know something's going on with their body, so they're out there and just kind of making a little scrape here and there. Rubs, on the other hand, I've barely seen any rubs. Now there is one issue with that. I think the warm weather has been affecting another aspect of it, other than just the deer movement itself. Hunters. Mm-hmm. I bank on pressure, and my area is there's just no pressure. Right. So when I'm going in there, I'm staying out of there for a while. When I'm going in there, I'm expecting the pressure to be there to push them back there, and there's nothing. So it was the 15th. I made a quick little lap around a couple areas that had traditional night sign, there's a couple rubs there, but as far as in those back areas, I'm kind of lacking on that, honestly.
Right. That's interesting, man, that you mentioned that, because I never thought of that, because I've been actually having the opposite effect, where some of the properties I hunt, early in the year, and then, even as it gets into later into the year, though, I usually experience some pressure. Even if it's private ground, I usually experience some pressure that a lot of guys hunt this one particular piece. But the same has happened where it's the warmer weather has kept folks out, but it's actually worked to my benefit this time, but where I was actually able to capitalize on some natural deer movement. Sounds like the opposite's happening to you, where you're kind of banking on hunting off of other people's pressure, and they're just not moving the deer into those areas that you're used to seeing them. Is that kind of what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what's happening. And it took me a few sits. I think I'm on like sit number 7. I just did sit number 7. Mm-hmm. That was on the 15th. It took me, I'm looking here. So the 11th. The 11th is when I kind of realized that. So I started making moves on the fly. Mm-hmm. The great part about being a mobile hunter, right, is making the moves on the fly. So I started doing a little transitioning myself to different areas, and I ended up bumping one of my target bucks. So my focus on that kind of turned to trying to figure out what was going on with him right then and there.
Right. So I know you mentioned it's, I think a lot of folks have kind of been experiencing that it's been unseasonably warm in a lot of areas. But, what are you looking at as far as weather that's going to be coming through here in the next week or so? Or are you expecting a cool down at all? Or is the temperature getting ready to spike again? What's the story there?
Yeah, we just missed the best cool down period right now. It's been so warm. There was just that frost last night. And, of course, I had to work. As what we're seeing right now, coming up, we're going to have some colder nights. They're getting down to the 40s, but daytime, you're still getting up in the 60s. I think one day, it might be Saturday, it's getting back up in the 70s. So at least we're getting a little bit cooler nights, but the temperature's still a little bit warm during the day.
Right. And what about with this warm weather? The one thing I've kind of noticed, I'm curious if you're seeing the same thing, is that there's still just an abundance of food just about everywhere. I mean, I know for me, in some of these areas that I've been to, tons of acorns all over the place, but still the timber's still green, and the trees are still hanging on to foliage, and what I'm usually used to seeing starting to really dry up as far as like the natural browse and stuff is really still kind of hanging on. Like the deer that I saw this past weekend, they were still just browsing through the timber, eating off of browse on their way through. So are you seeing the same thing? Have farmers pulled their crops yet in your areas, and what's the story in the timber for food?
Yeah, absolutely. There's oaks everywhere still. You can find the areas that the pollen is all dried up, and then within 100 yards from there's areas where it just got hit last night, kind of a deal. The browse, the same thing you said. Everything is still green. There's still oak trees that are still like kind of vibrantly green. Right. Crops, some cornfields are coming out, and of course the cornfields that you want out are still standing. So,
right. So, big question here with all that food in the timber. The October lull is kind of where we're at as far as this portion of the season goes here, as we kind of start thinking about moving toward pre-rut, and then of course the Super Bowl of all things whitetail with the rut and stuff. The lull, is it something that you buy into? Is it, in your opinion, is it fact or fiction? What's your thoughts there?
I don't buy into it. I think it's just people just need to change their locations, change their tactics a little bit. I'm a big bed hunter. I try to bounce around the areas. I'm still trying to figure out how to be aggressive with it and how not to be that aggressive with it, so I don't blow the areas out. I still saw some. They're still. They're hanging out in the areas a little bit more. They still have to move. They still have to eat. You just have to find that food source. And with the ever-changing food source, it's kind of you kind of got to bounce around, scout for that hot sign.
Yeah, I mean, it's The lull, I've always kind of thought of it, in the past couple hunts that I've done, it's kind of proved out. It's like I've seen deer, and this is the time of year when they, a lot of folks will say that you shouldn't. I think a lot of times folks like to use the lull as an excuse where they're hunting places where they traditionally have seen deer and during different parts of the season. I think you're right. It's like you have to be willing to move around and kind of go to where the deer are. They don't have a lot of reason to expose themselves at this point from bed to food because what you had just mentioned, which is there's food all over the place in the timber right now. So why take the chance? So I think being a little bit more aggressive if you can, right? If your property sets up that you're hunting the right way, and if you have the right access, it's time to kind of get a little bit more aggressive because they're probably going to hang a little tighter to bedding into places that they're comfortable because they can, So I'm kind of aligned there with you. I'm curious though, you talked about you're hunting mobile, which I of course love to hear because I kind of follow the same kind of approach. But this time of year when we're in the, the quote unquote October lull period, what tactics or strategies are you looking to use this time of year? Is there kind of like a plan you like to put into place that, year after year you like to kind of go to? I know one of the things you like to do is hunt beds a lot. And I'm just curious if there's anything outside of that you like to focus on.
Transition areas. I'm going to try to transition to scrapes a little bit earlier than normal. Last year, and the year before too, started taking notes is really an eye opener. I started noticing camera movement on these scrapes a little bit sooner than you go to forums and you read everything. It's all like the last week of October, the 25th, through and into November. I guess in my situation up here, in upstate New York, middle of the state, it kind of seemed like those areas are a little bit hotter a few days prior to that. So I'm going to start focusing on that a little bit more, but transition areas, transition lines coming out of bedding, kind of waiting for those bucks to move a little bit closer to those doe bedding areas, any type of little areas like that. That's all been pre-scouted.
Yeah, what's kind of wild is the one thing some of the guys I've talked to had mentioned that they're even that they're seeing that calling is even working at this point in the year. Like I usually don't consider grunting or anything like that until I get definitely toward the end of October I guess is when I would start to employ it. I don't even think I even pulled a call out of my bag at this point. But I've had two guys that I've talked to who've actually had bucks responding to grunts at this point in the year already. Is there anything, do you see anything like that this early in the year in New York or up where you're hunting, or are you kind of follow the same approach? Do you kind of leave the calls alone until you get later in the season?
I always bring the call with me. Just you never know. If I'm not into blind calling, but it's funny that you said that Thursday. I think that's a southwest and a west wind. It sets up for an area between primary scrape and some buck bedding. Basically, my back, the wind will be to the face. The back is on a cliff. They can't get downwind. I'm going to try to squeeze in there, basically climb up this cliff almost. And I'm going to try to do a little tickling of the tines and a couple of grunts just to see what happens and try to be a little bit aggressive. I know they're back in there. So I why not?
Right.
I'm not afraid to fail.
Right, exactly, man. That's part of hunting whitetail, man. You got to be willing to eat a little humble pie once in a while. But hey, man, I do appreciate you coming on. And before I let you go, I just want to say I haven't told you this personally. I think I sent this to you in a Facebook message. But congratulations on your Train to Hunt achievement this past summer. That was awesome. I kind of followed along your journey, and I know you placed well in the regional piece. I think it was out in Pittsburgh is the one that you went to. So I want to give you congratulations.
Hey, thanks, and hey, congratulations on your success the other day.
Oh yeah, man, I appreciate it. Yeah, it was a fun hunt. We'll I'll share that story here in one of the upcoming podcasts. But it was awesome. Always a good time in the timber. Always nice to wrap your a tag around a buck. And now I'm just looking forward to getting to Ohio and hopefully having some decent weather while I'm there.
All right.
All right, man. Hey,
I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I want to thank all of you for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook to keep up with this season's whitetail excursions, and good luck to all of you out in the deer woods, can't talk. Before we shut this thing down, I want to thank our partners for helping us keep this podcast going. So a big thank you to Whitetail Institute of North America, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Lone Wolf Portable Tree Stands. And of course, a big thank you to this week's reporters. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
coming if it all. It takes a special knowing to colorful. Damaged heads, broken letters. Rationalize yourself in numbers.